Yeah, no, ace. Well, Stefano, thank you so much for taking this time. I know it is in the middle of this run up to Christmas, so I bet you and Macknade are super busy. So thank you for taking this time. Do tell me more about yourself, how you are right now, and kind of a little bit more about Macknade.
Yeah, by all means. So Macknade is it's a place. It's where my family's farm has been based. We no longer farm. We Macknade now is it's a retail focused business with hospitality as well. I say retail focused. I mean the reality is now that hospitality really it embeds itself in every part of the business because as we touched on, it's that element of the family spirit, the family sentiment and how we make people feel, the experiential side of it, which is certainly key to hospitality. And so, whilst yes, we were the business is founded on what was the shop of the farm Macknade Farm Shop, Macknade being the farm. And as I say, my family came to Macknade to the mid 1800s from having farmed across Kent for longer. We stopped farming about 20 plus years ago when sort of the general pressures of farming sort of were eating too much of the family business, and we focused in on what was what, as I say, was a small part of it was the retail. And now we still have a 7 acre site. We have the principal food hall. As I say, I'm the, sort of the sixth generation here on Macknade from that point of view of the family. My parents are around. I run the business with a leadership team. I see my father now. He's doing a bit of painting. My sister down the road, so he's on site. Yeah, family are always around. But we've kind of having grown up with several uncles and my mother sort of in farms. It's now me focused on the retail side of it. And but as I said, a key part of it is we're sort of commercially run by a leadership team who've
Mm.
yeah, some are new in, some have worked with me up through the business as well.
Yeah. Okay. Yes. 'Cause I think one thing that really stands out is just the longevity all the way from 1847. And is it sixth generation that we're on now or?
Yeah, so I mean, I think it's like anything. I think sometimes, yeah, there's a bit of a you get a family businesses and everyone wants to show how long the family business has existed for, and
Oh,
there's kind of a bit of a yeah, sort of a power play around. For me, I suppose
mm,
the importance of that is sincerity and underlining longevity. So
mm-hmm.
when we talk about scaling our business and growing our business, it's done in the context of saying, we will be here in 20, 30, 40 years time. And so
Mm,
some of the decisions we'll make are based on those sort of timelines. Whereas perhaps a startup looking to exit after 5 years has a
yeah.
different approach. Now, it's not to say one is better or worse,
No.
but it is to say they are different approaches. And I think, particularly in sort of the fairly dynamic society we live in, being able to say, we take longer term views,
Mm,
even if that doesn't necessarily mean the greatest financial returns,
yeah.
that's important. And we can sort of justify that by going, it's not just me saying that from a marketing point of view. Yeah,
Yeah.
we've been on this site for over 170 years. Yeah, we've been farming in Kent
Mm,
for longer. And so it comes from a place of sincerity. Now, whether
yeah.
people draw on that or not, but it's not a case of me going, yeah, we've been here 6 years. Yeah,
No.
it's a nice narrative. Everyone loves a story. Don't get me wrong. But I think it's to show that we want to impact on the
Mm,
future, and we
yeah.
do that in a kind of a more measured and longer time scale.
Yeah.
I think the other element as well, people do, particularly from farming families,
Mm,
people are able to measure, and I include myself in that, are able to measure their own timelines against something that's constant and significant and has always
okay.
been there, even if it's fairly banal. So I've grown up in the
Mm,
business, and we have customers who are now, edging towards the edge of the end of their lives, but that will have seen me as a baby. They'll see my
oh,
children who come in who are now sort of
yeah.
14 and 16, and they're able to quantify their own lives through, my family's business in that sense. And I think there is a sense of security,
Um,
continuity, and satisfaction
yeah.
in that as well.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, talk about being a part of the community, of how that impact is there. And I didn't even think about some of the older customers would have known you as a little boy. Like,
Well,
yeah.
we're farming, but I mean, bear in mind, we're quite particular as a farming business. You invariably, particularly you go back a generation, you depended on the local community to come and support
Mm,
harvest times, right?
to
I mean, a very
come.
different world from what we have now, which is
Mm,
much more automated, huge bits of machinery,
yeah.
perhaps as well, sort of more overseas workforces coming in. You go back sort of 40 plus years, and so a lot of people would have been touched by the farm, right?
Yeah.
One way or the other. plus the
Yeah.
fact just by its physical nature, people will have passed it, walked through it on
Yeah.
a daily basis. So you become, yeah, whether you're proactively looking to support the community or not, just by the
Mm.
nature of the activity
Yeah.
historically, that would have been part of.
Yes.
And then I think, there is nothing more important to humanity really than food and drink, right? And so whether look at the farm we have now. We when I was a kid, we grew hops. Beer is not exactly feeding the country, but hugely important part of our culture.
Mm.
Now I look
Yeah.
outside. Again, some fields will have arable on them, which obviously will go into
Mm.
bread. But there are also black currants from the days we used to grow black currants that go into Ribena. These aren't. So I think it is these elements that there can be some romanticized elements of what agriculture brings, but the reality is the physical r-
Mm.
nature of farming is that it has a tight
Mm.
sort of a binding impact on its community. And in our case, where Faversham is a market town, an old market town, where our farm, Macknade, and our farmyard now, the food hall is right on the edge of the town, so it's part of the town as well as then being that farm. So we had a constant connection with the area, the physical area.
Mm.
And my feeling is that businesses and farms themselves, but certainly us now, we really are a mechanism to move value through a community. So as local community come and purchase from us, yeah, we create employment,
Yeah.
and in turn move that whether that is emotive value or it's economic
Mm.
value. We
Mm.
kind of act as a platform to do that.
Mm.
In its purest sense, before we start to think about the social impacts that we then can have or
Mm.
want to have, and that for us is important.
Mm.
Not only
Mm.
do I think from the point of view that as a business we have a responsibility to do that actually add value into the community, but also it makes business sense as well. If you're not adding any value in this day and
Sure.
age, then you get found out pretty
Yeah.
quickly, or
Yeah.
you're just cheap. Right? If that's your game, fine, cheap
Okay.
and quick, yeah, online. But otherwise, you've got to be
Yeah.
adding value in, and I think that's where family businesses have real value because there tends to be a different approach, shall we say, than just sort of traditional capitalist shareholder value return.
Yes.
It is about some sort of broader narratives.
Yeah. 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 And I guess it comes back to what we were saying earlier about the longevity and really taking that long-term impact stance and how it is planned. And it really sounds as though being kind of the custodian of the land and what you know, the impact that's made on that community of yours. I think family businesses are so aware of this.
Yeah, and
Um,
again, we no longer farm, so again, I think the farming one has that very much on that, and that's a discussion, particularly around inheritance tax at the moment. It's very relevant with regards to that. But I think
yeah.
any family business, it is that aspect
Mm.
that there are a whole load of other considerations coming into forward planning than just whether
Mm.
you're driving enough,
No.
cash down to the bottom line to keep shareholders happy.
Yeah.
And don't get me wrong, cash is critical to every business.
Mm.
And I think that's probably why some family businesses struggle and ultimately come to an end is because they don't
Yeah.
they
Add
don't
value.
prioritize that in the same way they do some of the emotive aspects of it. But I think that's the opportunity
Mm.
with family businesses is to balance those aspects
Mm.
out. I certainly
Mm.
get, I have a lot more freedom, I think, than a lot of my peers who work in other businesses.
Okay.
Um, and that freedom allows me to spend time with my family. I think there's probably a
Mm.
higher level of responsibility I have, perhaps than others who work in other business in sort of
Mm.
other commercial entities. So you
Yeah.
you you kind of see what suits you. But for me to be able to work with or at
Mm.
least be around family, and in the broader sense, the
Mm.
working families, those I work with, who come into
Mm.
that remit and the broader community, I think brings a huge
Yeah.
amount of value that isn't cash focused, if that makes sense. But I
Yes.
certainly wouldn't give up for
Okay.
just the cash alternatives. Yeah.
Yeah. I'm with you. And you mentioned there about the responsibility. So, how was this for you as an individual, Stefano, to become CEO of the business and of the family legacy and this impact? So, how was that for you the moment that you became, and is it fair to say the head of the business? Is that a phrase you'd use or?
I mean, I think you can use any. For me, it's a continuity, really, and it's so. I mean, you become a flag bearer in that sense, and as much as on one side, as CEO, I mean, we're an SME, so we have these terms to kind of try and differentiate. The sort of the titles don't really matter, but I think it's the roles we play. So within the
Mhm.
commercial entity, I have a very good leadership team who run the business. They're better than I am at operational integrity of pushing the business forward. So for me,
Mm.
it is to play that flag bearer for the business as a
Mhm.
whole, and in turn for the family as well. So there are some decisions around that, that there is, from a simplistic point of view, there are different members of the family who depend their livelihood on how the business does, even if they're not engaging in it.
Yeah.
And so
Yeah.
there is a sort of a sort of an explicit practical reality, responsibility in that
Mm.
sense.
Yeah.
Um, and then for me, there is that element of, I'm aware that the position I have now, and I don't mean in the title, as in the way my life is now, is
Hmm.
based upon decisions that have occurred over numerous generations.
Mm. Yeah.
And I recognize I'm fortunate in that in many ways. I think
Fortunate.
there is some, again, some negatives perhaps that you feel as though you're heading down one pathway that perhaps you might have taken another. But I think on balance, for me, I feel very lucky to be in a position or
Mm.
to have what I have because of what's gone before. And that's not about
Mm.
wealth or
Mm.
assets or property. That is about the opportunity I have
Mm.
and how I live my life.
Yeah.
And so as a result, you then want to see that flow forward. And I think that responsibility comes not so much just with the family, but with, and we touched on
Mm.
this earlier on, but with a
Yeah.
number of other stakeholders, a number of other
Mm.
people, communities, entities that depend upon what we do.
Yes.
And I think it's being humble about it. It's not being so there's not an arrogance there, but also
Mm.
it's not all of us get the chance to have that responsibility, and it's something I think is I feel very I feel blessed that people
Mm.
will choose to come and shop with us for argument's sake in a very pure sense and have done for 30, 40 years. Particularly Christmas is a prime example.
Mm.
Massively important aspect for families to sit around a table metaphorically or literally.
Mm-hmm.
And we'll have families who've chosen to come to Macknade and have their Christmas in effect delivered by Macknade for decades and decades. And
Mm.
that's not about just buying good product. That's about that moment with your people who are most important to you and you love most,
Yeah.
that actually it's going to be an incredible, special day that people can bond over. So for me, that people have taken the time to think that we can offer that for them and deliver that
Yeah.
for them is, it's humbling, right? It's pretty
Yeah.
special.
Yeah.
And so that responsibility comes with that. So I think it's like anything. It's don't get me wrong. I think we all have responsibility in life. I mean, just
Mm.
mine is a particular,
Yeah.
particular sense of just where I'm positioned in a business and that
In
has a
business.
family slant to it.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm with you. I mean, I really hear how you feel privileged and fortunate, and like it's humbling for you, and it's like it's an honor to be able to work with the community and like, provide them with good quality food. Um, Speaking more about exactly this privilege and also the community, because looking at the video on your website, there is a little clip where you say that Macknade has really helped your aspirations, and it was a hope that Macknade would support the aspirations of other people, particularly members of staff. And it really was shining through from your whole website and on LinkedIn and every time that I've spoken to you. So, talk to me more about working with kind of non-family members of staff and people who you employ. Like, how have you managed to bring them into the family?
Well, so a couple of things on there. I think so. For me, the idea of family business, yes, there's a literal sense. My parents used to run it, and I'm in it, and I've had children who will come into it, and there's an ownership piece. But when I going back to that point about its aspiration, I think it's really important.
Mm,
I think as with every family, you have good times, bad times, what have you. But for me, there was always a very clear sense of a safety net that my family provided me with, both emotionally, day to day, long time span, and
mm,
wanting me to be the best version of myself and doing, whether those are my parents, my mother, whether my
mm,
grandparents, my father worked hard within the business, even my siblings. And so I think that for me is when we talk about family business is not just going, yes, the literal sense, but also that ethos, that sense that actually as a space, as a
yeah.
platform, I think we should be that safety net for our stakeholders, be they our team or our customers, our suppliers, but
Mm,
also a platform that they can push off from, much in the same way as I think an
mm,
effective functioning family
yeah.
works.
Yeah.
And that's a really important part of family business. Is not just the literal sense. Okay, that's fine. You make what you will of it. If it's an
And
important story to you, brilliant.
yeah.
But actually, it's more for me. It is that discussion around the kitchen table at supper. It's how do you
Mm,
transfer that into a business so that everyone feels included.
mm,
These elements are hugely important. And then following on from it, as I said, I mean, we're a generational business. So we farmed. We no longer farm, but I'm sort of the sixth generation here at Macknade.
mm,
And I guess the point of that is that you come to a business not as a startup, you're not starting it up, you're not putting your own energy in. So you've got to try and find your space and understand how you're going to add value to, at the very least,
Mm,
continue if that's what you want to do. If you're looking to
mm,
sell it, by all means, take a different strategy. But if you're looking to continue the business, what are you going to bring to it that's going to
mm.
allow for that? Bearing in mind that
Yeah.
yeah, as each decade goes past, there's you've got to do more than just sort of
Mm,
status quo. And I
yeah.
suppose my parents, we had been dynamic Kentish farm post Second World War, and 80s were pretty tough. My father's married into
Oh,
to the family farming family, it's Italian, hence the name. And so
oh,
he brought a particular grit to really sort of
okay.
pushing part of the business that didn't exist. Kind of that pick your
Mm,
own. Before it was quite a conventional, good sized Kentish farm.
okay.
And I suppose what I'd say his sort of style of leadership with my mother is more that kind of hero leadership approach. That idea of like, I'll just get it done through grit and sweat and hard work.
Mm, okay.
And
Is
that's not
this
to say
your dad?
my father on, yeah.
Yeah.
So, and that's with my mother. I mean, the two of them worked on it together, but and
Mm,
that's not to say that I don't work hard. But the point is that sort of leadership, it gets you to a certain point where you can't, the breadth then goes, right? So for
right.
me to come into the business, we needed to scale and grow, and that can
Yeah.
only be done really by, so an engaged team. So I
Mm,
suppose and that kind of works towards my sort of skill set, which is perhaps
mm,
creating a compelling forward narrative that people want to be part of and feel they can be
mm,
part of it.
mm,
And then getting comfortable in providing people with a bit more autonomy to make decisions for themselves. And
yeah.
we've made plenty of, we're still learning as we go. But I think that for me was that point. The business could only grow and move forward and evolve and develop
Mm,
if you've got a team working.
yeah.
Now, in some family businesses, that might just be more family members.
Sure.
That's not how I'm structured. And to be honest, I like the diversity of non-family members coming in.
Mm,
Because one, I've got to inspire them in a way that's not just a case of, you're going to be part of the next generation. There's got to be
mm,
something they genuinely believe in. Now that can
yeah.
take the shape of equity considerations or
Yeah.
financials or whatever else it might be.
Yeah.
But I think it's more around a compelling narrative and objective and emotive reasoning.
Mm,
And that's what we kind of bed
yeah.
down on. So don't get me wrong. We talk about community a lot, but we're a
Mm,
commercial entity. We expect cash to go down to our bottom line, and we want to
yeah.
grow that profit, but we want to
Mm,
do it in a way that is supportive and constructive to our
mm,
community and to a longer term point of view.
mm, mm, yeah. I'm with you because I can hear that that grit and to be able to kind of push something like your dad was excellent at doing. And I don't want to suggest that your dad gives the impression that he kind of like fumbled through people. It's not so much like that, but both is needed. And
I think that's yeah, and I think yeah, it was very much my parents together really who again in fairness to them because the business was of a size and it kind of kept it down really it was my mother and my father driving it forward. My mother was it was a classic kind of husband wife. The wife does
his,
the accounts and then
yeah,
the husband does a great
classic.
and you see that a lot and so I think it is. But the other thing I think was important just getting across to others and for me is always a great discussion point. My parents were very good in some I said probably in some ways not if they say they weren't but I think they were brilliant. Our succession process. So again, we're a small business. Don't get me wrong.
Mm,
We're not. Yeah, you'll be talking to much bigger businesses. But what we did, we worked together over quite an elongated period of time.
yeah,
And my parents are hugely respectful to me. They were never patronizing. I mean, sometimes I could argue that perhaps they didn't give me they gave me more space because they wanted than but it allowed me to make mistakes, shall we say? So, but I think that for me was a really and it's I suppose it's part of it
mm,
was the quirk of the situation we were in as much
okay,
as my father married into the business, right? So
right,
he wasn't the next generation directly himself.
yes,
So his energy going forward and driving, there was not a conflict, shall we say, with my grandfather. I think you find quite often in
right,
family businesses there can be a tension between
yeah,
the bloodline family
yeah,
generations, whereas my father was kind of the energy that really drove it forward with my mother. My mother hadn't really, she wasn't business oriented, business minded at that sense, but my uncles weren't interested in pushing the business on. So she
oh,
kind of defaulted by coming in. And I think as a result, it meant where as kind of the bloodline generation working with my father and my grandfather, it meant there was less of a tension around, I suppose, whereas that often can be problematic where you have
yeah,
particularly in farming families, I think where you've got those kind of generational, the older generation not letting go. My father
yeah,
was pretty good at managing that with my mother, and likewise, my mother. I think she did a grand job around just
mm,
transitioning from where my grandfather was, them
yeah,
taking it on, very
yeah,
different business when they took it on, pushing it forward.
Mm.
I kind of drifted into the business, if I'm honest, in the first instance.
Okay.
But we kind of worked together. I say that in as much as I always
Mm.
wanted to be in the family business, but
Oh, you
I'm not
did.
the most. Yeah, I'd enjoyed my it's a my early years. But I think the
Okay.
point was we spent time handing the reins over. If that made, it wasn't perhaps
Mm.
as structured and explicit as it could be. And I think that's where perhaps
Okay.
your role, and we're seeing more, is actually giving
Sure.
more structure to that. But it
Mm.
was that element where you start off. I certainly remember working with my parents and realizing that I'm probably adding 20% of value between the three of us, and they're adding the 80, and you
Oh.
just start to recognize over time that that percentage shifts into
Mm.
the next
Okay.
generation,
Yeah.
to the point whereby actually
Mm.
I'm making the decisions,
Okay.
and that had a natural flow to it, and I think that was a really important
Mm.
process.
Mm.
Whereas my brother did look to come into the business. He's much more. He's a very different character. I mean, he works in insurance. He's in London. Yeah, very sort of sort of corporate chap. But took a much right. I'm going to jump in and do it, and it came, and it wasn't right at the right time for my parents. They were still
Mm.
fully involved in the
Okay.
business. Wasn't to say he was necessarily wrong,
Sure.
but I think that it's for me, it's finding that process of succession is critical,
Yeah.
and I
Yeah.
say that not just for family businesses, as in any business, right? We
Yeah.
just my
Yeah.
last MD has just moved on. He's just got another job, and he managed again. For me, the measure of our business is the succession
Mm.
to our commercial director, who's now leading the business. From him
Mm.
was brilliant, right?
Mm.
And just meant that we had continuity, different leadership style now, different approach.
Okay.
Absolutely what we wanted, it was planned for.
Okay.
And I think that succession piece is critical in family
Yeah.
businesses.
Yes. Yes. And I hear that in your family, it was not as though there was a really marked, written down plan, but
No,
nonetheless, it was smooth for all intents and
yeah,
purposes. Is that fair to say?
I think you're absolutely right. I think we had I suppose shared accountants and you shared
Mm.
kind of, yeah, input from that point of view. But I think it was probably, yeah, I think I certainly I now have, yeah, I have stuff written down now. I just say we now have what we're
Okay.
trying to achieve as a business,
Okay.
and I'll go back and then what I personally want to achieve as well. And so for
Mm.
me, is having that structure much more clearly defined, I think, is useful.
Okay.
I
Okay.
think my parents and I, our temperaments worked well together. For me, underlined the
Mm.
importance of having a succession. In
Mm.
our case, it was a little more informal, shall we say? But I think
Mm.
probably the formality is useful,
Mm.
particularly with other dynamics, because
Okay.
it starts to set a process that for me is absolutely
Yeah.
critical.
Yeah. Yeah. No, definitely. I am so curious to know more because I guess I wonder how long did it take, do you reckon, to kind of make that the transition?
So I mean, I got more involved in the business. So well, again, I can give you a few details. So trying to think dates. I think I was probably made a partner in 2007. So our structure was partnership, family partnership. It was my grandfather, his wife, my grandmother died a while ago. My grandfather's died, yeah, 10 years plus now. But and my parents were partners, and so I became a partner. And then when my grandfather died in 2010, what I wanted to do, and I'd already started looking, this is part of this, how do we move the business forward? So already looking
Mm.
at is putting the commercial entity of the business into a limited company. And so part of that was that idea that actually for me, I wanted to bring others into the
Mm.
business and have more clarity. So
Okay.
the joys of a partnership is, you know,
Yeah.
it's fairly informally structured, which is fine for family.
Sure.
But when you start to bring other stakeholders in, particularly at a high level, for me,
Mm.
one, the banks, I want a good working relationship with my bank. They start to want to see sort of management accounts, P&Ls, etc.
Mm-hmm.
And so I want to start bringing in a more serious team. So start holding them to account more effectively. So profit and loss and
Yeah.
sort of annual accounts, etc. Strategical decision making was more important. So what I did, I brought the business into a limited company away from the partnership. And so by 2012, we'd moved the trading entity
Okay.
into limited company.
Okay.
And so at that point, I then onboarded really our first general manager,
Okay.
who in effect, up until that point, it was me and my parents, and then
Mm.
quite a big gap in the team in effect. Yeah, and the team would do brilliant, great guys, but they would, we were in the business all the time. They
Yeah.
would do, what they were asked to do,
Mm.
and we had a good manager in fairness at the time as well. We had some really good managers who kind of sat between us and I say sat between us, but
Mm.
who were kind of that conduit to a certain degree with us and the
Mm.
team.
Mm.
But shaping the limited company really then started to restructure up the business
Right.
in that sense. So
Yeah.
that's kind of so to give you that, yeah. So again, I've been working since I was 25. What I'm 46 now, but 2007. So a couple of years to become a
Mm.
partner.
Yeah.
2007 became a partner, and then what 5 years to then move the business into a limited.
Yeah.
By the time it was going into a limited company, yeah, my
Mm.
influences then became heavier than my
Mm.
parents. And then
Yeah.
from 2012, and they kind of I suppose, have been out of the business now for the last 6, 7 years, really. So
Okay.
we're 25 now, aren't we? 2026,
Mm.
25. So yeah, probably by 2018, 19, they were starting uh,
Yeah.
to, so, it's not a short process, if that
Um,
makes sense.
yeah.
And again, and I think you can condense it down with good planning,
Mm.
and that's the way it worked
Mm.
for us. We're a small business. We weren't,
Sure.
but I think the point
Mm.
is there is a need for it, and I think particularly there is a need to start planning much earlier than,
Mm.
and certainly this has
Mm.
been part of
Yeah.
what I've picked up from a lot of the inheritance tax discussions around, is that there is still a tension
Yeah.
between whatever people think politically or financially about
Mm.
inheritance, there's still a tension between
Mm.
generations that needs
Yeah.
time to be considered. And if it's left
Yes.
too late,
Yeah.
aside from any financial
Mm.
implications, it just makes that
Mm.
transition harder.
Yeah. Yeah.
Whereas, yeah, that's something I'm yeah, hugely grateful to my parents is how they've managed me
Mm.
through the business, and in
Okay.
turn, a lot of learning for me because
Mm.
it's as well, it's taught me how to look after my team as well. So it's not
Mm.
knowing how, again, comes back to the aspiration
Yeah.
piece. My parents have always
Yeah.
provided that for me. And
Mm.
I don't think in a kind of giving me everything sort of way, just in a giving a
Mm.
very safe, comforting, challenging way as well, environment that,
Yeah.
hardworking, but,
Mm.
high level of integrity. And that's
Yeah.
what you then look to pass on with the team. And because you see the results from that as well, right? You're given the right conditions, people
Yeah.
then work effectively,
Yeah.
and so everyone benefits.
Yeah. Yeah. It sounds like you've really like coached and shaped the team for everybody's benefit, as you say, and like for that family ethos. And I'm hearing that from kind of 2007
Yeah.
and then 2012 was a kind of a landmark up until kind of 2019 when your parents stepped back. So it's almost a 12-year stretch.
Yeah, I mean,
It's a long time.
realistically, I think that's the valid, and I think part of that is I suppose I'm a confident individual, but having and you can look at it both ways. I think I think about this a lot actually. I mean, there are probably some decisions I would have made faster had I been by myself, right? So don't get me wrong. I'm not saying it's right
Mm,
or wrong.
mm,
One of the great joys of family business that I get from, I like being with my family. I like, yeah, in all its
yeah.
guises. So I get a lot from that. And so I've
Mm,
chosen to, I do think at the same time, so if I was to look at it, constructively in a negative way, I say negative way, but I could have gone faster. And so I think that would, whilst the succession's worked, I think, yeah, from a family point of view, it's been great. From a business point of view, I think we could have been more dynamic, right?
okay.
And even to the point, I suppose, if I look back, because we stopped farming when I was 21, we historically we'd owned the farms, we'd sold the farm back to the we'd sold the farms back and then taken on lifelong tenancies. And then when the tenancy laws changed, anyway, the point being
Mm,
is my grandfather gave up a lot of the tenancies when I was 21. And actually,
okay.
had I had more grit myself at the time,
Oh,
I think would I have taken the farm on in its entirety, not just. And I think that's
mm,
a sort of that's where I'd like my parents perhaps to have considered the longer term view there. Now, I
okay.
wasn't in amongst the discussions at the time, so they might have said it just
Mm,
wasn't the case to be done. So I think you've got to look at it in both lights. See the real positives for me. That long extended succession I've learned a lot from and
yeah.
has been a good
Yeah.
training period for me. And now
Mm,
we're ratcheting up as a business now.
yeah.
At the same time, too long and
Mm,
unstructured in that sense, informal.
yeah.
You can miss opportunities. I think that actually,
Yeah.
potentially a tighter, supported
Mm,
succession process could work more effectively.
yeah. Okay. I've got you.
And I think probably one other thing that's just with thinking about your space as well. Um, with family businesses as well, I think there can be, it's not necessarily negativity, but there can be within, particularly with smaller family businesses. Um,
Mm,
there's not necessarily the drive to think outside of the box, actually really go
mm,
for high level objectives. So
mm,
status
mm,
quo works,
yeah.
which has its value. But I certainly, for me, part of, I was never into coaching and all that kind of stuff. It's like, yeah, a load of rubbish, not for me. And then I think NatWest would have been around 2010. We banked with NatWest, yeah, one of many banks, but they had a coach, yeah, sort of free coaching scheme on at the time.
Mm,
And so, a bank manager at the time said, well, why don't you listen? You're going to get this. We've got some really good folk here anyway. It helps me out because as
mm,
a bank manager, I get a box ticked if one of my
okay.
clients takes on. I say, okay, fine. And so I had a really good lady who came, she big business Shirley, I remember now.
Mm,
And sort of gave a really good input outside of the family. So I have a very
Mm,
great, loving, safe family environment, but I think didn't
mm,
necessarily push me
mm.
in certain ways that could have been pushed.
Okay.
Whereas having that kind of coaching piece did come along and go,
Mm.
actually,
Yeah.
we will think as big as you want to think, right? I mean,
Mm.
then got to build a plan to get there, but
Yeah.
don't be put off by people going, that looks a little bit too, or just not having enthusiasm for it. So I think
Yeah.
that's where, again, I think not just
Mm.
succession, but generally,
Yeah.
the family environment can be really
Mm.
safe and loving,
Yeah.
but it can also sometimes not be as dynamic as you
Mm.
might want, as you might need it to be,
Okay.
particularly if you have aspirations to grow.
Yeah.
And so that's where external input, I think, becomes really important as well.
Mm. Yeah. Yeah. I'm with you. I feel like business coaches, and it's interesting actually because I was having a conversation with just someone recently about getting burnt by a business coach, and
There's a lot of rubbish. There's a lot of
there's a
rubbish.
lot, there's so much rubbish out there, and this is exactly what she and I were talking about. And I had a business coach at some point. I got burnt, so I thought everybody has a story, and I will call myself a business coach. I would use that phrase to describe
Yeah.
myself. Um, but yeah, as we say, like
I think you're right. So again, this is also thinking. So for me, I went through this very. We do now. And we've got a non-executive director and the various different ways of getting involved in that side of it. But yeah, as I said, we're an SME. I'm sorry, yeah, quite we're sort of 7 million turnover, sort of 80 staff. So we're not small, but we're kind of
mm,
we're not even medium yet. We're still at
yeah,
that bracket. We're looking to push on. So
mm,
we have a bit of a capacity, but not.
mm,
But the problem is at the SME end, there are people who don't deliver and decide they're going to
mm,
go out in consultancy in one format or another, and we see it
yeah,
all the time. And I've
yeah.
picked up in that, and I
People
think
get
that's a
hurt.
real problem. I
Yeah,
think there's a huge amount of and I want to talk about coaching as well. I mean, you can do that from a peer network group. You can find there are
yeah,
so many other ways than just having a
totally.
coach in per se.
Yeah,
I think I think back to Shirley, for example, and not only that though, I think one of the elements of it is whatever that format is, you will invariably get to a point where it no longer adds the value back into you. So you've got to feel comfortable moving on from
yeah,
that. And I
yeah,
think that's the other element that then does. So one is you
totally.
get rubbish in the first instance, or just what's not suitable to you, right? The
Yeah,
matchup isn't right.
yeah,
And then then as businesses you stay in these relationships too long when
yeah.
actually they've fulfilled what they needed to, and you need to move on.
Mm,
So I think there is that external input can be
mm,
hugely valuable, not for everyone,
mm,
but you've got to get
yeah,
it right because there's a lot
yeah,
of junk out there, and
yeah.
people getting away with stuff that
There are. Yeah, I totally agreed. It's absolutely. There's so many cowboys, but I think the right match and the right time of getting the right professional in can
Yeah,
like
absolutely.
absolutely be like sparks. It
Yeah,
can
yeah.
fly. I'm really glad that you did have that experience with a coach who was really helpful and that you kind of landed in there with the bank. That
Yeah, I
sounds
think
ace.
these days there's not so much of that around anymore. But no, it was funny just because was never my thing. It's still not. I like to do look for, but actually I do. And now
Mm,
more and more with our team, we do try and see where we can find spaces that they're either getting. We get coaching
mm,
internally as a team as a whole, but actually external, whether that's
mm,
just peer groups or whatever it
mm.
might be. Because I think it's important that external input for people to
Yeah,
just develop their own thinking.
yeah, yeah. I'm with you. I'm so with you. And maybe one last question for me. And maybe there's actually two, because you did mention about Macknade in the future.
Hmm.
So if you're comfortable to share,
Yeah.
would you let me know like some of the things that
Yeah,
we
absolutely. So
can
we have a
expect?
site. I've tried again. 2018, 19. We opened another site, another couple of sites. COVID came in and kind of kicked us, but also
Okay.
a couple of the other elements I looked at. They were just the wrong fit in the end, and so
Mm,
they're fairly hard lessons. But yeah, for me, it is about So we have four core aspects to our business. What I call placemaking. So here at our 7 acre site, there's a multitude. It's not just one unit that people come into. There is a whole community aspect of different
yes.
businesses, and it's creating these places. And
Mm,
also the placemaking works. We see more and more, whether it's urban centres, towns, where people are looking to how do you create a sense of place, and food and drink really sits at the heart of that. So that's one part of what
mm.
we look at. We then do the retail, we then do F&B, kind of the hospitality, cafe, restaurant aspect,
Yeah.
events,
What
and then
is
production.
F&B?
It's food and beverage, so it kind of
Oh,
covers
okay.
anything that isn't retail, if that makes sense.
Okay.
And so, just for us internally, so yeah, we've got a cafe, we do experiences, we do events, we do
Mm,
a restaurant, pop-up suppers, that sort of thing. So that would come under our food and
mm,
beverage element,
okay.
and then the retail is the shop
Mm,
element, and that's and then we do production as well. So we produce our own. products, but
Mm.
also others do it for us, and then whether we own label it or so those are the four channels of growth. So typically for me is we've got the 7 acre site, we will look to other sites where we can anchor a food hall in the way
Mm.
we do, and then look at other businesses around to create these community centers. We then look at online as well. I think online is an important opportunity for us. One of the things that is
Okay.
more and more relevant is health and wellness. So we're seeing how food and drink is central to that,
Yeah.
and also it ties in with that community element. So we have a number of sort of health and wellness, sort of broad brushstroke term aspects on our site. And we're seeing how people are engaging in their wellness through what's for wanting to live longer, but also
Mm.
rather than, I don't know, going to the pub very simplistically,
Yeah.
people go to the gym to see their friends, right? Or they're going to the
Mm.
sauna to see their friends, or
Yeah.
they're then adding that on to a sort of a multi-day. So that's kind of the space in which we're operating, thinking actually, the food and drink that we offer is not only a lovely experience,
Mm.
and there are important
Mm.
narratives to the production, the quality of the food.
Yeah.
We do full carcass butchery for argument's sake. So there's discussions around, eating
Mm.
less meat, but it's about better quality meat. And then
Mm.
some of our farmers that we buy from are what we call pasture fed. So they're grass systems that they manage themselves within the farm, so they don't bring any inputs in.
Mm.
So you get a better biodiversity on the. So you see there are a whole load of other aspects. The
Yeah.
idea is that people live better with Macknade, and that's very much what we look at as a
Yes.
growth for the business. Food and drink being at the heart of that, but actually, living
Mm.
better. Sit at the top of the pyramid, and
Yeah.
really looking to deliver on our own personal aspirations.
Yeah. I'm with you. I'm with you. It's good to know that it's kind of expanding more online because speaking of hampers,
Ah, yes, yes.
I can get one posted to me.
Absolutely brilliant. Yeah. So well, we were said to you before. So yeah, at the start of the conversation, we were talking about I'm in our actually the room I'm in at the moment. So it's our hamper room where we put hampers together and what have you. One
Mm.
number of hamper rooms in fairness around the site, because it does, it's chaotic at Christmas all over. But originally this room here was one of the coal rooms for the. I mean, it's an old host house where our cafe is. And so the hop gardens are at just the back of the farm, and so this will be full of coals heating the. And now
Yeah.
it's yeah, this is one of the joys of the business, right?
Yeah.
We're farming. The same buildings are still being used and
Yeah.
repurposed for
Yeah.
food and drink orientated businesses. But yes, hampers are becoming a sort of a growing
Yeah.
part of our business. We do on the corporate side. So we've always found corporate clients who want a premium gifting offer that we do that,
Mm.
and then also more and more on the direct to consumer and public.
Mm.
And so I think this week we're in the independent for top hampers. I think the Daily Star picked us up as their hamper choices as well of
Yes.
all places. So yeah,
Woohoo.
we got recognition on that, but part of that is because we
Yeah.
send nationally as well. So and we
Yeah.
get we get international call outs as well. Trying to send hampers internationally is
I
difficult,
bet.
but certainly
Yeah.
we're on the way down into the continent, right down here in Kent. So we get quite a lot of
Mm.
continentals. French coming through wanted to take
Mm.
some good Kentish cheese to show their French family
Nice.
just how well us Brits do cheese.
Yes.
Wine as well, more and more Kentish wine is growing. In
Mm.
fact, got Tassinger have bought a vineyard with their British partners just up the
Mm.
road from us. And so this will be the first Christmas that their wines, their Evermore, Domaine Evermore is released. So yeah,
Mm.
there's lots. So yeah, what a
There's so
big part for
much.
us this Christmas time is sending
Yeah.
gift food and drink gifts out. So
Yeah.
charge to the hamper to find out. There we go. It's all there
Yes.
online. It's all there online.
Perfect. Perfect. And maybe one last question from
Yeah.
me is that I noticed that Macknade are not shy about saying that you're family owned.
Yeah.
It's there on the website. I know under the vacancies page you say be a part of our family. And I know we speak about what family owned might mean in a literal legal sense, but
Yeah.
also the ethos.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I wonder what you would say to family owned businesses who might shy away from the fact that they're family owned because we have got 80% of businesses are family owned and we hardly ever see family owned now on our businesses and people don't really mention it anymore.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, what are your
Well, I
thoughts?
think so. It's a really interesting conversation I've been having with others and internally myself more recently. I think it's hugely important. As I said to you, one element of it is that trust and longevity. I think particularly in a world, take our political cycles, they're just continually, 5 year here in the UK,
Mm,
we look at
yeah.
change of leadership all the time. So getting a sense of saying, this is what we do, this is what we've done, and this is
Mm,
what we will be doing in the future, and
mm,
people being able to understand and trust and believe that means that when we talk about what we're trying to achieve as a business, lowering impacts through the products we choose and so how we look after our team, people don't have a trust and belief in it. So I
Mm,
think there is that element that family can illustrate that. And a whole lot of other added value aspects that come with family business. It isn't just something that
mm.
that people should assume. It's a bit like putting fresh fruit over your fresh fruit and veg department. Well, it should
Yeah.
be fresh, right? So,
Yes.
yeah, let's talk about it more. What I think is interesting though, there is also the risk, and this again, particularly in our sector, is that everyone jumps on the family business bandwagon and just chucks family business. You
Mm,
need to qualify it, I think.
mm,
So what's more important is, so for me, this is more and more where we'll start to move more towards, saying our community lives better, right? And getting people to
mm,
think about that idea that actually Macknade, you come into Macknade, you're going to live better. Now, a core reason for that is that because we would take long-term views
mm,
and we have a historic knowledge, and that
mm,
comes from the fact that we have existed over a number of generations as a family
mm.
business, and that we, in the same way that a good family functions, that's how
Yeah.
we want our team to function. So
Mm,
I think probably going forward, we will be implicit, strongly implicit, if that makes sense,
mm-hmm.
in as much as we're wanting to explain how others can gain from us
Yeah.
because we're a family business, not necessarily just going, oh, we're a family business and
No.
leaving it to people to try and work out, well, where's the value in that? Yeah.
Yeah. Sure.
So I think that is, and I think the other dynamic that I think is interesting as well is I love the family analogy, but also I get pushed back against that in times from a work point of saying the people, other sort of peers who like the team analogy. And I think there is that element that
Okay.
goes that, as a team, you want the best individuals in each of the different areas that have their best skill sets
Mm,
to that element. Whereas
mm.
perhaps a family analogy allows for, people to get
Right.
away with a little bit because they're in the family.
Sure.
So I think
Yeah.
it's understanding where the analogy works most
Yeah.
effectively, but really qualifying it. So for me, that's the point about what I think family is wonderful for, is giving you that platform of being able to
Mm,
push on and drive yourself forward. But
mm.
I think the team analogy works
Yeah.
alongside that in saying, you take the best bits of family and apply them to the best bits of
Mm,
teamwork, and
mm.
you're going to move forward as a business, right? But
Yeah.
for me, is very much stories fun. Everyone loves stories, yeah. But it is for me, it's about if I'm talking about things 10 years down the line, I mean that. If I'm talking about things 30 years
Mm,
down the line, I mean that. I'm not just,
mm.
and as a result, people can trust what I say and tell them. So.
Yeah.
So I
Yeah.
think you got to work it out for yourselves. But each and every business. But I think it's
Yeah.
the old school way of just going, oh, we're a family business and you're the staff and you work for the family. I don't think that has any value. I
Yeah.
think it's got to be
No.
inclusive. There has got to be a pride. There's got to be a shared goal and objective. And yeah,
Yeah.
it's very difficult for a team to share in an objective that is
Mm,
simply more wealth for the
mm.
family, right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
you then got to consider how does that work more
Mm,
broadly, and that there is something that everyone can believe in,
mm.
and that for me comes back to actually my longevity, my continuity provides a responsibility that means that I'm here to look after. I'm here as a figurehead that illustrates that as an entity, we're looking after a broader group. Yeah,
Yes. A figurehead. Yeah. Totally. Totally. Thank you. Thanks for sharing all this.
that's all right. No
It's
worries. I hope it's
wonderful to know. But
no worries. Well, thank you for asking. I appreciate it. It's always good to share. So.
no, no.